Hi, everybody. Welcome to your Nexus report for Friday, the 20th of October, 2017. The left loves hate speech. They love the entire idea of hate speech. The reason they love it so much is because they get to use it to get people to shut up, which is the business that they're in. All of their policies are so just not only counterintuitive, they're counter reality. So you can't have any criticism coming in, can't have any other opinions. And so how do you silence people? Well, you really have First Amendment protection rights in this country, so what they basically are trying to do is to say that certain kind of speech is hateful, and therefore it should be banned. There's a debate going on college campuses about the proponents of free speech versus those people that believe in the idea of hate speech. And again, the beautiful thing about hate speech is it can be anything you want it to be. If you don't like the way I talk about President Obama's spending, you may find that offensive to black people, or whatever the case may be. It may trigger a microaggression in you, cause you a great amount of stress. Therefore, it's hateful. Therefore, it's an assault, and therefore it has to be banned. Zach Greenberg has a great article over at FIRE, that's the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. Just the fact that we need an organization like that, and as desperately as we do, it's a pretty good indication of the trouble we're in. Here's some of the things that Zach wrote about. He said, despite the debate raging on campuses, and this is a quote from Zach, in the United States, hateful speech is fully protected by the First Amendment. There's no hate speech versus free speech debate raging in our nation's judiciary, nor is there a balancing test, an exemption, or a special constitutional provision allowing the government to prohibit it. Hateful speech is categorically protected in our nation, including at public colleges and universities, and that's not changing anytime soon. I hope he's right about the last sentence. I suspect he probably is, because he goes on in this article to talk about what a world without hate speech looks like. You know, a world where you get to decide what can be said and what not said. There's some examples, and these are just skimming the surface again from Zach's article. In Pakistan, you could be sentenced to death for blasphemy. In Egypt, somebody was arrested for waving a rainbow flag. You know, the flag at gay pride parades. They were arrested for debauchery. In Turkey, there are 30 journalists facing consecutive life sentences for anti-government articles, life sentence for each one of them, apparently. And if you think it's just those savage Islamic countries, well, think again. In Germany, police raided dozens of homes for hateful postings over social media. In the United Kingdom, a man was convicted for anti-military posts on social media. And in France, a man was fined for holding up a sign that says, "Get lost, jerk," to former President Sarkozy as he drove by. The reason he said "get lost, jerk" is because Sarkozy himself had said to somebody, "Get lost, jerk." But this man ended up getting a big fine for having insulted the dignity of the president of the French Republic. Of course, we don't have that here. We don't have the government blocking us or arresting what we say, not here in America. Here, we just riot and burn things until the people who are speaking of an opinion different than ours are forced to go away. That's how we do it in America. It's a much more individualistic kind of thing. Look, the key issue on hate speech is even if you wanted to ban it, I don't think there's any condition to ban it. I don't care how hateful it is. If you don't like it, don't read it. But the proponents of it will say, well, we're just going to use it to ban stuff that's genuinely harmful, you know, like Nazi propaganda and that kind of thing. Well, the question is, who decides what's harmful? When I was a little boy, I'd seen my dad get pretty lathered up about the Nazis. He joined the army as a first lieutenant. He got to Germany in April of '45, just a week before the war ended. Never got shot at, not a combat veteran by any means, but he certainly hated the Nazis, and I grew to hate them too. And I still hate them. The more I learn about them, the more I hate them. But here's the point: I was shocked when the Nazis marched in, was it Skokie? I think Skokie, Illinois. And I basically said something like, what are these guys doing on the streets? They should be arrested. And my father, of all people, said, no, you got to let them march, Bill, because if you don't let them march, the question becomes who decides? Who decides what's allowed and what's not allowed? And if you don't want someone to decide, then you either have to go all the way or none of the way. You either have to say that basically everything is subject to censorship or nothing is. And we have said nothing is, which is the key to our success. It's our openness. Christopher Hitchens has a close. Christopher Hitchens, a very interesting fellow who died several years ago. But basically, he challenged students on campus with this. This is Hitchens' quote. To whom do you award the right to decide which speech is harmful or who is the harmful speaker, or determine in advance what are the harmful consequences going to be, what we know about enough in advance to prevent? In other words, if you're going to prevent hate speech, what is it that they are about to say? Who can determine what they're going to say? Nobody knows. Back to Hitchens. To whom would you give this job? To whom are you going to award the job of being a censor? Well, the left wants to award the job to the government, because the left, up until last November, let's say, governed the country as if they were never going to lose again. But then the American people got up on their hind legs and decided to just sort of derail this path to the gulag. And that's the last thing I'll say. We're going to do a series of things on the gulags. Everybody knows about the Nazi camps. Nobody knows about the Soviet communist camps. But just this morning, by coincidence, I was reading Alexander Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag Archipelagos. And he said the worst thing about being a slave laborer, digging a canal through granite in the winter with your bare hands, a wooden wheelbarrow to haul it out. Probably 120,000 people died building this canal. And when the canal from the Baltic to the White Sea was finished, Stalin took a tour down it, and a lot of writers talked about how magnificent it was. But the problem is the canal's not deep enough, because they built it in 2 years, so it's useless for shipping. It doesn't do anything. It's useless. But what Solzhenitsyn said really made an impact on me. He said the worst thing about being a slave laborer during that time, you're watching people die, you're dying yourself. Solzhenitsyn says your tongue is numb from hunger. But in Solzhenitsyn's words, you still had to chirp, which means that as this regime is slowly killing you, you have to praise the regime. You have to talk about how you're being reforged as a new working Soviet man and the corrective power of labor and all the rest of it. You couldn't even suffer in silence. Even when people are killing you, you had to praise them with your speech. That's the end result of what happens when you let people decide what is hateful and what's not. It's not pretty, and I'm not going to let it come to this country, and you're not either. Thank you so much for your membership at BillWhittle.com. It keeps messages like this coming, and we will see you again on Monday right here on the Nexus Report.